If I had my way, everything would be so nice. This world would be like Paris. No, it would be a paradise. No one would ever have to say, I'm gonna get my wish someday. All one would have to do is say, this is my order, if you may. Welcome to another episode of The School Without Walls. I am Antonio Hobbs, host and founder of this educational initiative. My guest today is Mr. Cameron Williams, who is a senior here at the University of Arkansas, and I'm proud to say he's one of my Spanish students. Yes, Mr. Cameron, Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir.
I happen to say Cameron, you know, it's because of our relationship, right?
Yes, sir.
This is, of course, as you know, this is National Black History Month, and the term is used as celebration. And it so happened that I lived when it was 1 week. The founder of this idea is Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who's one of the earlier PhDs of the most prestigious school in America, and that's Harvard University. And during the 30s, he realized that there was a need for his people, the African Americans, to know their history too.
Yes, sir.
The reason I say too, because the history of European Americans was mandatory. You could not graduate from high school without having their history.
Yes, sir.
So he started a national movement, and they had 1 week of national attention toward the African American, and later it became a month. Now we have a month, so we haven't made enough progress. What I want is your generation
Yes,
to
sir.
work toward Black history being taught year-round. You might not be able to put it in the public school system like that, but you can definitely have it in the churches.
Yes, sir.
See, a large segment of our people go to church, and especially it's important when it comes to our denomination, which is African Methodist. It's connected. See, it's connected, whereas many of the churches have self-autonomy. This group does what it wants to do, another group over here does what it wants to do. But in the African Methodist Church, we are under a bishop, and of course, the bishops meet together on a council, and we have laws and regulations that affect every person, regardless of which congregation that person is a member of. So we have a nice system of getting our history taught throughout the world. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, idea was not the celebration of Black history. That is the system. See, the system is the power. When I said the system,
Yes, sir.
they came in with the celebration of Black history. And so Dr. Carter G. Woodson wasn't saying celebrate, but teach.
Inform. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
inform, you see, and of course, I think we should kind of handle that with the, as the old folks say, with the grain of salt.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're
Yes,
not
sir.
celebrating, we're just trying to tell the truth about the positive things that happen in our race.
Yes, sir.
Any
Because
comments or questions?
I understand that. It seems that during the month of during Black History Month, you know, we hear the Martin Luther King speech. Growing up, being a product of the public schools, my experience was we would hear Dr. King's speeches and things of that nature, but we wouldn't so much spotlight. You may spotlight 2 or 3 people, and then that would be it for the year, and that's all you know of
That's
your
a
history.
bliss all over the nation, right?
Yes,
One or
sir.
2 key people, but so much. And so we want, one reason I invited you here, I want you to be a part of that new generation that's going to make a difference by first being a thinker, and of course, according to, I guess you might say science, according to scholars, only a few people do that. Most people are not accustomed to thinking.
Yes, sir.
We are conformers to thought,
Yes, sir.
and leaders must think. And of course, I think it's based on biblical principles. I'm not trying to put anybody down, but God ordained leadership. And he wouldn't have ordained leadership if everybody had the skills.
Yes, sir.
You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So if you have the skill, you set yourself and you have the skills, then you have a responsibility to think rather than just buy into whatever is presented before you.
Yes, sir.
Now back to Carter G. Woodson again. Carter G. Woodson I might have mentioned this. You know, I was on a prior show, a program. I don't like to call it a show either.
Yes, sir.
Program, because to me a show is an entertaining initiative, and this is
Informative.
informative, which is a program teaching. Now he wrote the Miseducation of the Negro. You've heard about that, right?
Yes, sir. I recently purchased it just
You
so I can
recently
start.
purchased it. Now, what is your, as a young man, what is your definition of a Negro? You know, we don't use that term anymore.
Yes, sir. We don't. When I grew up, Negro was what we called. We would say.
Your generation did hear it when you was young. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Negro?
sir.
Okay,
Yes,
Negro.
sir. Not in that, not pronounced that way, but we heard it. It was a derogatory term, something you use to call to, basically
To
to say
offend?
someone is
offend?
ignorant
To
and to
offend?
offend.
To
Yes, sir.
offend,
It was
okay.
a bad thing to be a
Okay.
Negro.
Now you're not confusing with the N word, are you? Nigger.
Well, we heard all, both words in that
Yeah, they're
same
not the
connotation.
same.
Yes, sir.
They're not the same. See, Negro was a term that was given to the African by the white power structure early in our, in our civilization here in America,
Yes, sir.
and it meant black.
Okay.
See, Negro came from the Latin word meaning black,
Yes, sir.
and of course, most of us didn't know. I don't know whether the European Americans knew it or not, but the word nigger, it was the derogatory word.
Yes, sir.
That was to offend you. And while we're on that word, I'd like to say to those scholars out there that are using the N-word, I feel like this. If I'm discussing the history of this country,
Yes, sir.
it's imperative that we use the word nigger if that's what we're talking about. Don't be afraid to use it. The N-word was created by European Americans who were ashamed of what their ancestors had done. So they didn't want to say the word because they knew it was offensive. They know the purpose was offensiveness. But when you're discussing it, I think it's important to say the word,
Yes, sir.
not the N-word.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Because the young folks go, what in the world is the N? What does the N stand for?
Yes, sir.
See, so as African Americans, we need to be strong enough and intelligent enough like we're talking, to say that once our people were referred to the negative way as niggers, not as N's,
Yes, sir.
okay? But do not refer to one another casually as niggers, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, it's break time, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Wake the sun, tell him that I've begun to dream of things to come, and tell the trees not to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
Hey, listen up. We have a challenge.
A big challenge.
Many African Americans fighting diseases like leukemia
Lymphoma.
and sickle cell anemia can't find.
Can't find marrow donors.
We need more African Americans to step up.
Step up. You could be the one to save a life.
You can be the match.
Take the first step at BeTheMatch.org. Step your game up.
Those of you who have just joined us, I'm Antonio Hobbs, host and founder of this educational program called The School Without Walls. My guest is Mr. Cameron Williams, a senior here at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, and also one of my Spanish students, we were talking about the word distinguishing Negro from nigger, right?
Yes, sir.
So we got clear on that, right?
Yes, sir.
Negro represented the community, and our people accepted that, but they never accepted the word nigger because they knew it was mean-spirited and it was derogatory and all that demeaning. They knew that.
Yes, sir.
But Negro was accepted. Now, this is something else I want to say to the general public. It's important to understand the importance of doing research yourselves
Yes, sir.
rather than just depending on what somebody else wrote in the history books. In Spanish, black is negro, masculine, negra, feminine. All right, many of the slave traders were Spaniards. So when the Spaniards brought Africans to sell to English-speaking people, they referred to them in many cases as black, which was negro. All right. The whites couldn't say that so well, so they would say Negro. Many of them not understanding so much of it being black, but that's what I have some Negroes for sale and so forth and so on. And then the feminine gender is negra. Now watch this very closely, public. Many of the well-meaning white citizens refer to African as negras. It's almost like Neger, but it wasn't the same. The negra, he's a negra.
Yes, sir.
Negra, that's Spanish for black, but it's feminine. You understand?
In the feminine tense.
Yeah, but they didn't know any better. They meant well. So even I lived long enough here from them. We don't have anything against the Negroes. We work well in this community, the Negroes, and all of us get along fine. Well, some black folks are offended because they thought they was trying to say nigger.
Yes, sir.
No, that wasn't that at all. So these are some things we want to learn. Okay, now any comments or questions on anything I've said before I move on?
I'm understanding so far.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, now what I want to do is talk about the rest of this time. If we don't have enough time, we'll complete on another program.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm very much concerned about how African Americans speak English. And of course, we have been abused and misused because we as a people don't speak English exactly like European Americans speak English.
Yes, sir.
And one of the reasons is because coming from Africa, that was not the basic language. And we had a language called P-I-N-D-I, and Pidgin. Let me see where I have Pidgin. P-I-D-G-I-N. Pidgin was a language that was spoke, a type of English that was spoken in Africa prior to the slave experience.
Yes, sir.
It was, now Pidgin is a language that does not derive from any nation of people. Pidgin is a language that was created by the Africans to communicate with Europeans who spoke English in commerce.
Yes, sir.
See, they've been trading together for years. The Africans and the Europeans were trading.
Okay.
So they picked up the language, English, from the white people on this order. So, for example, he say, in place of say, I'm going, he would probably say, me go.
Yes, sir.
That was understood. All right, him gone now. That's Pidgin. And so when they came to America, many of them could communicate with one another in Pidgin.
Yes, sir.
The slave masters did not know that. So what the slave masters wanted to make sure that they lost that native tongue. Because if you lose your native tongue, you can't communicate and organize it to strengthen yourself.
Yes,
okay?
sir. Yes, sir.
So, but they still could communicate through Pidgin. Almost any slave could speak Pidgin. And of course, I said that to say this. Many of our families have continued some forms of Pidgin because we had, 250 years when we didn't have schools, right?
Yes, sir.
It was against the law
For
for
an
an African to
African-American.
read, to look in a book, or to act like he had any sense.
Yes, sir.
All right? So these things we have to overcome. So in understanding that, to see somebody like you and like Ms. Vaughn and those of us who are doing well, that's a great achievement. We have 3 minutes here in this segment. So we want to talk about, don't forget P-I-D-G-I-N is Pidgin language. And the other language that we have was West Indian Creole. Now, Creole, it's depending on who's defining it.
A blend of cultures.
Yeah, it can be a blend of cultures, it can be a blend of languages, but it means mixed.
Yes, sir.
I guess that's the bottom line. The best way to deal with Creole means that which is mixed. It's not the original. In this case, we're talking about languages, right?
Yes, sir.
So from the West Indies, they brought in to this similar to Pidgin, you know, like leaving out certain verbs and things, which was for communication purposes, but it's difficult to, you can't function in a setting where standard English is required. So we're emphasizing you all learn standard English, but do not be ashamed of your mother's tongue.
Yes, sir.
Because the mother is the foundation of all languages come from the mother. But it's, in other words, I've been taught to believe that there's no bad English or good English, but there is a black English.
Yes, sir.
That's the language that was spoken by most of Africans up until recent years. Now, we're going to have to close out here in just a few minutes, I believe. Randy, how much time do we have? We have 1 minute. So our next session, we're going to talk about Gullah, the Gullah language.
Yes, sir.
The Gullah language, G-U-L-L-A. The Gullah language, Pidgin, and West Indian Creole was the language that African Americans spoke daily up until, you might say, about 50 years ago.
NFC, AFC, offensive linemen, defensive tackles, quarterbacks, and cornerbacks are all working with United Way for a million little reasons. The kids of our communities, to ensure their academic success all the way to graduation day. You see, it takes about 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a kid becoming one or the other could be a professional athlete, or it could be you. Studies showed the earlier we get to kids, the better their chances. So become a United Way volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor, and make a difference in the life of a child, for the life of that child.
Give.
Advocate.
Volunteer.
Live united. Join your favorite NFL players. Take the pledge. Go to unitedway.org.
Seven 7,000 high school students drop out every school day. Let's catch them before it's too late. To start helping students in your community, visit boostup.org.
Those of you who just joined us, I'm Antonio Hobbs, host in this educational program called The School Without Walls. My guest is a student here at the University of Arkansas, Mr. Cameron Williams. And in the event that somebody is wondering why I'm talking so much, I didn't make this clear. This is strictly a lecture to the young people, and he's representing the young people today.
Yes,
this is a classroom setting where I'm lecturing on the black language. So are there any questions, anything that you'd like to ask about the languages?
With the Pidgin coming with the Africans, they had learned from the trading. It was similar to what the Europeans were saying, but not to the point where they could pick it up that they were indeed communicating together.
Definitely.
Right?
Only those who had worked with the Africans could understand it.
Yes, sir.
They could understand it, but the normal European could not understand what he was talking about. I didn't get to take time to go like, him gone, him done gone.
Yes, sir.
Him done gone. You know, him done gone.
Yes, sir.
Well, they couldn't figure out what he's saying, but those who worked with us, he said, he's gone.
I think that's a credit to those Africans.
It
and
is a
that
credit.
They were able to learn the English language, which is one of the most difficult languages to learn.
Right.
If you're not a native speaker of it, and they were able to pick that up by ear.
By ear, that's correct.
No
And
books.
they created a system. It was really a system, you know, where it was a system where they could pass it on, and they knew how to go into the tenses, but not according to the standard English.
Yes, sir.
And that continued in the United States for 200 or 300 years. And the reason it's so significant, we have so many young people that came to the desegregated school. The desegregated school is what they call integration. I never did buy into the integration concept, because integrate means to bring two entities together as equals.
Yes, sir.
Desegregate means to bring two entities together. And that's what the U.S. government did. They brought the African-American student and the white student on the same campus, but made no provisions for the difference in their past experiences.
Yes, sir.
And English was one that in this desegregated school that I finished, even in high school, each teacher understood what I'm talking about. So they taught the students how to speak standard English, because they knew how important it was in the commercial world in which we live.
Yes, sir.
And we have a lot of students that I meet here at the college and throughout the nation. They still have problems with the verb to be. They would say, I be, you be, he be, we be.
Yes, sir.
Understand? I be good and still don't get the grade that I should, and stuff like that. It's
Yes, sir.
I am, you are, he, she, you know
Yes,
the
sir.
verb, right?
Yes, sir.
So things like that is a carryover of the pagan language, and we shouldn't be penalized, in my opinion, for it, because the purpose of any language is to communicate what you want to say to another person.
Yes, sir.
But in our society, we have something called the King's English. The standard English is the King's English, and if you don't speak that, then of course you're penalized. I don't care how
Yes, sir.
smart you are when it comes to the technology, but perhaps you won't get the job because you're not
able
speaking
to.
the standard English. So we got to learn it. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Gully. There's more to say about Gully. Now, we're in the third segment, aren't we, Randy? Our Gully is a language that comes from West Africa. Gully comes from Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, in West Africa. Most of the slaves came to this country from West Africa. That's very important, because you can do a lot of research and study on this particular group of Africans, because they came from a certain section of Africa. And the language, they settled first in the Carolinas. And they have something called, there's some islands out there in Carolina. They call them the group are called the Sea Islands. They have various names, but the Sea Islands is where these people were placed from that area.
Yes, sir.
And they were skilled in raising rice. They introduced rice to America. Now, the reason they were able to retain their African language is because in that area in which they lived and where they raised rice, the malaria fever was very strong, and it would kill white people and didn't affect the black people.
Yes, sir.
I think it was due to that sickle cell, the sickle cells and so forth.
Yes, sir.
So what happened was the white landowners would train individuals to be leaders and managers of that group. So they were isolated, what I'm trying to say, and they maintained their African language. They had a little Pidgin connected into the Gullah, but Gullah is a language that was given to the Africans in America who spoke that particular language. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, it is reported that there are about 500,000 people in America today that do not speak English, that speak Gullah. But they're in the islands down around the Carolinas.
Yes,
So
sir.
it's very important for us to know. And they also are writing the Bible, those who've gotten educated, they're writing the Bible in Gullah. The Gullah language, if you hear it spoken, you might think it's Pidgin because it's sort of similar. It has English and African words. I believe, I recall reading that there were about 600 characters that are African that's in this language. It's mixed with some English too. Now we have about 2 minutes. I want you to make a comment and say whatever you need to say and whatever you want to say.
Just to make sure I'm understanding, they were able in those islands to maintain so much of their culture and language, especially because of the limited interaction. They were still able to have so much interaction with each other.
Right, and it was isolated from Europeans.
Yes, sir.
Because of the fever.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's the reason they were able to maintain. And it was just known recently by white scholars that the people really had retained that because they did some investigation after World War II. See, prior to World War II, there wasn't much contact with the European whites and those people on the islands at all.
Yes, sir.
But the United States government needed some of those islands for air bases, for training, and once they went out there, then they became aware of the people being there, and then scientists and so forth came by later, and
Yes,
then
sir.
they started investigating. Matter of fact, I have some personal friends that went down there in a laboratory and did some study. Some
Yes, sir.
persons that are persons, friends of mine, to get some first-hand information. I've never been there, but I certainly plan to go.
Yes, sir.
We have one more minute, and I'm going to give you the last word about Black History Month. What do you have to say about Black history or history period?
As a graduating senior and someone who like to consider myself educated and working towards those things, it's vitally important that we pay attention not just in this month, but in every month, every day to your own history, and then take a conscious role in how you are impacting that history too. Are you doing things that can build to the legacy and continue this great history of people? But most importantly, find out who you are. Find out about your history.
What do you think is important for a person to know his own history?
Because without your history, you have no sense of what you can do and what you have done. Without your history, you have no sense of where your people have come from and what your struggles are versus anybody else. You have to know who you are in order to empower yourself to feel empowered. So many times we grow up with no sense of culture, no sense of anything. It's everything. It's
You remember that poem I gave you, We Are the Keepers of Our History?
Yes, sir.
So that reminded me of that. We must write our own history, right?
Yes, sir.
We should not be angry with somebody else, another ethnic group that doesn't write it.
Yes,
We
sir.
got to see that it's in the public school system and so forth and so on. So when I was a child, we had two African Americans mentioned in the U.S. history books. That was Booker T. Washington, founder of Tuskegee Institute, and
Yes, sir.
Dr. George Washington Carver,
And they
who
had.
did more with the peanut than the monkey could. Huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Randy, time's about up, isn't it? This is the third section here. Again, I want to say to the general public, our time has changed. We are seeing each morning, starting at 6:30 to 7, and in the afternoons from 4 to 4:30, 7 days a week. Thank you for being here. Okay.